Right then, guys, we'll get started. Just to say a very quick welcome to everybody, and thank you for attending today's webinar. Today's webinar is Unlocking the Power of Motion Capture, the gold standard for accurate movement analysis. Just before I get started, though, if everybody can just raise your hand, just to make sure that you can hear me. Perfect. Good. Yeah, that's a good sign. Great start. Okay. But yeah, thanks for joining, guys. So today's webinar is hosted by Perform Better in partnership with Movella. Just to obviously get started and underway, just going to give you a quick overview of today's agenda so you know what to expect. So we're obviously straight into it already with the introduction and welcome. I am going to start with the importance of kinematic data analysis. We will then go into an overview of the Xsens motion capture system. We'll then go a little bit more in depth into understanding wearable motion capture systems. A little bit more then into MVN Analyse software, which is used with the Xsens system. Then moving on to some real life case studies, so you guys get to see the system in action and see how it is used out in the field. And then we will give time for some Q&A, again, with myself and Jordi, who I'll be introducing shortly. And then, yeah, we'll wrap it up there at the end then, guys. All right, so moving on. So just to give you a brief little background into who I am. So my name is Joe Jackson. I am the sports scientist with Perform Better here in the UK. Brief little introduction to kind of like what I've done in the past. Predominantly my background has been in strength and conditioning and sports science. Worked predominantly within football, as you can see in the previous section there, and a little bit of sports science into a couple of different organisations that work with, say, the Premier League here in the UK, and also a company called Game Change Performance, who work out of St George's Park, the home of England football. Currently, alongside my role here as a sports scientist, Perform Better, I am the strength and conditioning coach for a women's soccer team, Sporting Calcer. And yeah, that's kind of a role I do alongside this one here at Perform Better. My role here at Perform Better is demonstrations of sports science technology, such as the Xsens system, which we are going to be showing you today. I am also the ongoing support for all of the products that we do sell here at Perform Better. Try my best to make sure that we are at the cutting edge of research and latest developments within sports science. Also equipment repairs, so I do deal with all that sort of stuff here too. And part of my role also includes being a guest seminar speaker for some of the educational institutions that we do work in partnership with. I am then going to pass over to my partner here, Jordi, who I'll let you introduce yourself.
So thank you, Joe, for introducing me. My name is Jordi Kochel. I'm an account executive for health and sports at Movella, the mother company of Xsens, which produces the motion capture systems. In my previous roles, I've been a physiotherapist and a human movement scientist, also mainly in football. Worked in the first league of the Netherlands. And now, next to my job at Movella in the weekends, I support our local football club as a performance therapist and head of medical staff. My role here at the company is I'm responsible for the sales through our direct and indirect channels, sales of our MVN systems, MVN Awinda, MVN Link in the complete region of EMEA. So that's Europe, Middle East, and Africa for the people who don't know, in health and sports and ergonomics. We do channel partner management, so that's why we work closely together with local partners, as Perform Better is our local partner in the sports science and educational field in the UK. And like it says, like we show you today, I'm also a guest speaker at seminars. So yeah. But now, after introduction, we want to introduce you a little bit into the kinematic data analysis, and Joe will talk you through that.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Jordi. So just to give a sort of a brief background of kind of obviously what we're going to go into today. So obviously a very broad introduction, and obviously then we'll go a little bit more into some specific sort of case studies that we have a little bit later on. But again, just to give a brief introduction to kinematic data and what it is. Essentially, it is quantitative information that is related to the motion and movement patterns of athletes, but not necessarily just specific to athletes, but to general population and people in general. It does include measurements such as velocity, acceleration, displacement, joint angles, and body segment positions during various sport-specific activities, and again, movement in daily life. Typically is collected through motion capture systems, wearable sensors such as the Xsens system, or video analysis techniques. Now, what is the importance of this? Now, one of the first areas to sort of talk about here is to gain insights into movement techniques, which can then in turn relate to performance. Obviously, this is a method of biomechanics, and what we can then use this data to is to identify strengths, weaknesses, and areas for improvement for the athlete's movement patterns. And again, we will go a little bit more specifically into this a little bit later on. Now, with this information, what we can do is we can optimize a athlete or a person's training program. That in turn should hopefully enhance performance. Again, it goes hand in hand. Hopefully this then prevents injuries. And also one of the big key things that obviously as sports scientists, physiotherapists, professionals within that realm, they want to make data-driven decisions because again, that quantitative data is important to, relay that information to your athletes and then make obviously more informed decisions. As again, just to highlight really, kinematic data is valuable where precise movement analysis is crucial for success. And again, we'll go a little bit more onto this a little bit later on, but then moving on. So again, to give a little bit more of an in-depth look into the importance of this kinematic data, I'm going to break these off into 6 little subsections, and obviously won't go too crazy into these at the moment, but yeah, just give you guys a general overview. So going into a little bit more of how it enhances human performance. So with the biomechanics, some of the data that you do get from kinematic data, it allows you to kind of see where there might be detriments in an athlete's performance. And again, in turn with that, you want to improve movement efficiency and efficacy. And again, hopefully this will then lead into enhanced performance, and again, which obviously everybody wants as an athlete, is to have success within competition. Moving on then to preventing and mitigating injuries. So again, understanding the biomechanics of an injury is very important, because what you want to be able to do is be able to prevent that from happening again. So if you're able to look into somebody's movement, you're able to then see detriments within that movement, such as, asymmetries and, again, poor movement quality. Being able to then see that objectively with kinematic data and a system such as Xsens allows you then, again, to make more informed choices on where you should be directing your training. That leads then into the next point, which is supporting coaching and training methodologies. Being able to paint a picture for an athlete is obviously critical. So if you're able to paint a picture for that athlete and then show them, again, going back to quantitative data, if you're able to show them quantitative data, you're backing up what you're saying as a coach. And then that in turn hopefully leads to more trusting you as a coach from your athletes. And again, hopefully allows you to have more effective and efficient training programs. Next bit. Moving past sort of just performance in general. So kinematic data isn't just, just performance. What you're able to do with this kinematic data is you can look a little bit more into general movement patterns, where you're able then to develop more effective equipment and gear, particularly within sports. So looking at biomechanics, seeing where, you know, people may need, for example, the first one I can think of is if they've got knee valgus, for example, that might help you then design, you know, more trainers or sneakers that are more effective to combat, say, knee valgus. So, you know, helps cope with, say, look, a low arch in a foot. The data can also be used for development of prosthetics, exoskeletons, and other assisted devices. So people with disabilities, again, you know, gives people more independence, more mobility, and again, you can kind of do this off actual real movement of people with these disabilities. And then the final one is it can also play a crucial role in development of virtual worlds. So what I mean by that is obviously we're moving more towards like the metaverse, for example. Now, to obviously make that as realistic as possible, you obviously want to replicate human movement. What better way to do that with kinematic data and a system such as the Xsens, which hopefully in turn does make it a little bit more of an immersive experience. Moving on, thank you. So just to summarize there, it is an important tool for understanding, you know, general human movement and developing strategies to improve performance, prevent injuries, and also increase quality of life. And the final point just to add in there as well is obviously that immersive world one. So being able to provide that objective and quantitative measurement of movement, kinematic data enables practitioners, researchers to identify these movement patterns more effectively and relationships that may be difficult to see with the naked eye. You know, this then gives you data to back up, you know, kind of coaching decisions and optimizing movement quality and efficiency. Moving on, moving over to Jordi.
Yes, thank you, Joe, for the clear explanation on why kinematic data is so important in sports performance analysis and sports science. Like you already mentioned, there are a few different systems to do this. You can use video analysis, you can use the optical cameras in a lab, but you can also use wearable technology, which is what we do. Xsens motion capture, we are the gold standard for accurate movement analysis with wearable sensors, or the IMU sensors. So I'll shortly introduce you to what we actually do and who we are. Xsens is a company that was founded in Enschede in the Netherlands in the year 2000 as a spin-off of the University of Twente. And since that moment on, we have been the leading innovator in 3D motion tracking technology. At the moment, 23 years later, we have a global presence. So we are located all over the world, from the Netherlands to the US, China, India, Canada, and we have a global network of partners, over 100 in the world, of which Perform Better is one of our partners, like I mentioned previously. In our company at the moment, there are over 250 employees at the moment. And like I said, what we do is we own defining patents in the field of 3D motion tracking. And that's very broad and very big. At the moment, Xsens is part of the Movella group of companies. So within Movella, we have Xsens, which is the motion capture technology, and we have Kinduct, which is an athlete management system. Maybe some of you guys are familiar with that as well. We're not going to focus on that today, but it's also a product Perform Better can advise you on and give you more information on if you want to. So, an example, who is using our technology? This is a short overview of only a few of our customers all over the world, but from the names and from the companies and universities and institutes, you can see it's a broad spectrum of people who use it, from automotive, ergonomics, to the English Institute of Sports to measure with the Olympic athletes. Basically, what it shows is that everywhere where people move, we can help you analyze that movement. And this is how we do that. We use our human movement measurement systems, or called the MVN systems. These systems, MVN Awinda, which is on top here, and then MVN Link, which is at the bottom, are full body motion capture systems. These full body motion capture systems are consisting of 17 sensors, which are called IMUs, or inertial measurement units. Next to gathering all the data, and we'll dive deeper into that in a later stage, we We also provide standardized reporting through our motion cloud. I'll tell about that later. We have over 500 universities and institutes in the world who use our systems. That's very important because when it gets used so much in research, you get good validations and you can really trust and rely on the results you're getting. Our application areas for health and sports are ergonomics, sports science, rehab, biomechanics, and training and simulation. Like Joe touched on a little bit, many use cases, and today we'll be focusing on sports performance, so sports science. So Joe will tell you now something about the hardware overview and our Xsens motion capture system.
Thanks, Jordi. So just to give a brief introduction to the hardware within the Xsens systems. So as you already mentioned, there is two systems, so the Link and the Window. Like you already said, both are full body motion capture systems. Both consist of 17 inertial sensors. One of the unique features of the Xsens system is that it does have magnetic immunity. I will talk a little bit more about that later. With that as well, something that I will delve into a little bit more is the, again, unique to the Xsens system is the state-of-the-art sensor fusion. Now, one of the key things as well is that both of these systems can be used in any environment. You already touched on a few of them earlier, so biomechanics, sports science, ergonomics, and obviously simulation, just to name a few. But again, one of the big key points with the Xsens motion capture system is it is reliable and repeatable, validated data. That was a mouthful. Moving on. So to go a little bit more into the sensor fusion that I've just mentioned on the previous slide. So the sensor fusion compromises of these 5 different sort of subsections. First of all, it is the gyroscope, which compromises of looking at the movement within a 360 degrees, and it is looking at the angular velocity for 1, for example. The next, then moving on to the accelerometer, is looking at movement velocity. The next one is the magnetometer, which is where the magnetic immunity comes from. What this essentially will mean is that the Xsens sensors are unique in the sense that they are immune from any other radio frequency. So this allows for your data to be more accurate, so there's no interruptions. There's obviously radio signals around us all the time, and that's where the Xsens sensors are very unique and good. The next one drop down there is the GNSS and the GPS. So we'll all be familiar with that. We have that in our phones. We have that in our watches nowadays. That's obviously just your global positioning systems. So from obviously like satellites in space. And then the final one there is then just the barometer. But yeah, this is what the system is compromised of. Moving on. So how does the MVN engine work? So to start from the bare bones, so to see where the system starts, so this would be how you would work with the system if you had it with you. You would start by putting on the hardware, and we'll show you guys a little bit more in depth a little bit later what that looks like. You put on the hardware, and then the screen on the right hand side there shows you the dimensions that you would put in for your participant. Now, the dimensions that are on the screen at the moment are where you can go incredibly in depth. So again, you can provide all the measurements of, like say, foot and shoe length, shoulder height, shoulder width, for example, to get a full biomechanical model of your participant. And then obviously what this enables then is more accurate data analysis. What was shown at the bottom there is making sure that you have obviously then got accurate dimensions for your participant. Once you then have filled in those dimensions, what you then need to do is calibration. and you need to calibrate. Otherwise, the animation that was shown earlier would happen, and your participants' body parts would be all over the place, which obviously we don't want. Now, in order to do your calibration, you would have to do the end pose, which is shown on the screen here. Your participant would then hold the end pose. Once you then have held the end pose, you will do what the animation is shown here. You will then do some slight bits of movement. Hold the end pose, so hold that position in order for the sensors to then calibrate within the space. And then fingers crossed, what then happens at the end is then the final animation there, where you have a full accurate picture of your participant moving nice and accurately if the calibration is done well. Moving on. So again, what then should happen is then just relaying this then back to the sensor fusion that was mentioned earlier. You then get an accurate data picture of all of the things that we mentioned earlier, all linking into this one model. So you then get the nice gyroscope, you get your accelerometer, magnetometer, the GPS, and the barometer all in one great picture. And then hopefully, again, you get a nice little animation there of somebody being able to dance on the screen and then be able to obviously then show some accurate data analysis. Moving on, and then I'll bring it back over to Jordi.
Yes, thank you, Joe. Very nice explanation on how the system works. Like you said, it's fairly easy. You put on the sensors, either with the straps or with the suit, calibrate it. Calibration procedure takes only 10 seconds, and then you can already start doing your motion capture. The nice thing is, like you mentioned, it's magnetically immune, and due to our sensor fusion, so basically we fuse in our sensor fusion all the data, and then we make it work. And that part of making it work is actually what the company Xsens is. Xsens is algorithms. Of course, we produce the hardware ourselves as well. However, making it happen, that's where it gets really difficult. So that's where we're very unique at, and it gives us, through our sensor fusion engine, what we call the MVN engine, gives us a few unique points that you can take for granted that it works. However, it's not fairly simple that it is actually working that way. It took us, for example, almost 20 years, a little bit less, to get to that magnetic immunity, because all data streams, not only the radio frequencies, but also iron, metal, structures of buildings, computers, laptops, it all interferes the data. And making that work is very unique, and yeah, that's one of our unique points. So magnetic immunity is really important for us. However, with our MVN engine, we can of course have a good live performance, which you can see on the left side of the screen. However, on the right side, we have a HD reprocessed feed. So what you see on the left side will be live data. If you take a close look at the feet and at the hands, you will see that they are slightly jittering and a little bit moving. So we do have multiple contact point detection. However, in the live stream, sometimes that's a little bit difficult because it needs a lot of computer processing power. Therefore, we developed a feature called HD reprocessing. So what we can do, if I replay the video again, on the right side, it's HD reprocessed. So you can see the toes are actually in the right orientation, the hands are not jittering anymore, and it actually is as close as reality as possible. However, we don't do a nice cleaning up trick, but it's really our goal to get as accurate and as reliable and as close to that reality as possible. With the systems, you can use the magnetic immunity to detect the multiple contact points, do height tracking, record multiple persons at the same time. We have the options like with the GNSS or maybe with a HTC5 setup or anything, you can do the 3D positional tracking. And we have something which we call the impossible, which is like going anywhere. You know, you can go into the field, you can go into the woods, you can go anywhere you want to without being restricted to a computer, because we have a feature which we call on-body recording, OBR. With OBR, you can record with the link system on the body pack for the duration of the battery, which is 10.5 hours. That means that for 10.5 hours straight, you don't have to be near a computer, you can measure all the data, and then afterwards download it from the body pack and use it in the computer. I can imagine there's a lot of information to take in. If you have more questions, feel free to already post them in the chat box or ask them in the Q&A session or reach out to us after the presentation on the webinar. So there was a little bit of a part on the theoretics. How does the system work? What features do you get, etc. Now we want to go more into the practical side. Like, it's very nice that the technique works, but how are you going to use it in sports science? So what we're going to present is a few sports cases on what we can do. So here we have a first example, ice skating. With ice skating, it would be normally very difficult to capture the complete kinematics in an ice rink, because you have to put up a lot of cameras and then to actually record it very well. So with our system, you put it on the athlete, you measure it, and you can immediately output all sorts of data streams: center of mass, segmental data, joint angles, drag and drop, and you have a live feed there on what's happening, or reprocess the data afterwards. In this specific animation, you can see that the person is actually floating above the surface. This is a level which we call no level. So we have multiple levels in which you can reprocess, from a single level, where everything is remaining on the flat surface, to multi-level, where you can do stair walking, climbing, anything you want to do, including the height. And then we have no level for these kind of cases, or for example, when you drive a bicycle or mountain bike or anything in that instance, then we use no level. So this is a really nice example of how you can capture individual athletes in the natural environment, because in the natural environment, they move like they're supposed to. When they join into a lab, they'll probably move a little bit different because all eyes are focused on them. It's a completely different setting to the normal sports environment, and yeah, that way they move a little bit different. And this way we can assure that with the individual capture, we focus on the athlete, focus on the technique, focus on the performance, and you can immediately see what's happening with the kinematics. However, we can also do this for team captures. So this is an example of how we do team capture. This is a case in soccer where they measured 22 soccer players, or football players, as they call them in the UK, at the same time. So with the on-body recording feature, we were able to measure the 22 players and get all the data in there, as you can see in the video. Fun fact, for the people who know FIFA 22, FIFA 23, this is the way how they input the data for the actual FIFA soccer game to power their hypermotion engine. So it's a really nice way to show you how you can use the data to get as close to reality as possible, but in that use case, they used it for gaming. However, this is not the only use case. We also have a real-time analysis, like I said, in sport-specific environments. So in this next video, you will see a CrossFit athlete. The guy is like in the top 10 of Europe CrossFit athletes. And what we did is we measured him in the CrossFit box here in Enschede in the Netherlands. However, not only with our motion capture data, but we added in a third-party hardware, EMG analysis. That's the nice thing of our system as well, because you can add multiple instances to your kinematic data. In this case, muscle activation through EMG, and I'll show you how it works. So what you can see, the athlete puts on the system, the shirt for the Alwinda, and the sensors, puts a headband on with the straps and the EMG sensors. And then he's basically ready to start his training, but also acquire the data at the same time in his natural environment, which is like the ideal environment for coaches and athletes to work together and get immediate feedback on how they perform their sports or their techniques or any information you would want to get. The nice thing is what you see in this video is you don't have to analyze the data specifically in our own software. You can stream data, for example, into MATLAB. You can export data into Excel, or even create your own application in a program like Unity or Unreal. So the system is very flexible in use in both hardware integrations, but also in software integrations. So when you acquire what we call the big bucket of data we supply, it's up to you how you're going to use it, because we rely on the expertise of the user. Whereas we could also create standardized reporting for you, which I'll touch upon a little bit later. But in the end, we think it's up to the sports scientist or the SNC coach to interpret the data because they are the professional in their field. Last example, what I want to show is how can you combine the digital and the real world. We did a really nice case in the UK with Jota. Jota is an endurance racing team. So they participate in the 24 hours of Le Mans, the 8 hours of Belgium, Spa, a lot of these kind of races. And what they did is use our system to enhance the performance of their pit crew. And with that enhancement of the pit crew, they were able to lower their pit stop times with almost 2 seconds, which is like really a lot in their world. And this is what it looks like. So what you can see in this animation is, you can see that the avatar itself doesn't have the hands included, so we have multiple setups which are possible. This is one without hands because they were not able to use it through safety. If you then see this recording, it's nice, you can get all the data, but there's a little bit of a lack of context. That's why we integrated a USB camera function, so you can plug in any USB camera you want to and then synchronize it with real-time footage, which makes it way more easier to interpret the data. I've already showed you a lot about different use cases and how you can use the system, but I think it's also important to show you guys what kind of data do you actually get from us, which will be the next topic. Joe will touch upon what data do we get from the Xsens.
Perfect, thanks, Jordi. Yes, so to give you guys a little bit more of a picture of kind of what sort of data you can get from the Xsens system. So I won't obviously read every single one of the measurements out, but just to give you guys a little bit more of an accurate picture. So we've obviously got acceleration in there. And one key thing to kind of point out with a lot of these variables is that it is in all planes of motion. So obviously within your transverse, all the different 3 planes of motion that you do have. So frontal plane, transverse, and your sagittal plane. Again, so obviously a lot of these ones here are focused on velocity, but again, they're obviously within all of those 3 different moving planes that I just mentioned previously. Obviously got a few there which obviously are developed from the gyroscopes, such as angular velocity, and also the angular acceleration. Moving on to the next ones. Then going obviously a little bit more into the sort of data output that you get. You do get 23 different segments of data as well. So again, obviously you get a full accurate picture of the body via the biomechanical model that you did earlier on. Orientation of obviously all these different segments. Magnetic field obviously has that magnetic immunity, which obviously then stops any radio signals interrupting all the data collection that you might be doing. And then finally, you do get 22 joints also, and you're able to see the angle of all of these different joints. Moving on, Jordi.
Yes, thanks, Joe. So yeah, a lot of data, as you can see in the picture here. How are you going to analyze it? That was my first question when I came into this company, being a physiotherapist, being a human movement scientist, knowing a lot about kinematics and biomechanics. However, it's still difficult to interpret that data because you can see a lot of different graphs, but what does the peak actually mean? Or how does it translate in, for example, sports performance or injury prevention in a ACL case? So what we created, like I said in my introduction as well, we have a standardized reporting platform as well to make the data interpretation a little bit easier. So what it looks like is this. We have the motion cloud. In the motion cloud, you can basically upload a recording that you already made. So when you have a recording, for example, a single leg hop test, mainly used in a lot of knee injury rehab. You have all the hops, so the first, the second, and the third hop for left and right. And we output for you a few parameters, like the distance, what you would normally measure, is now objectified through the system. The maximum knee flexion angle, objectified through the system. Hip flexion angle, objectified through the system. And we give you an overall leg symmetry index. And in the legend, you can exactly see, okay, for the different parameters, what is green, what is yellow, what's red. We're not going to tell a physiotherapist or a sports performance coach or S&C coach what's good, what's bad. These people know. However, it gives you an indication based on scientific literature if there might be a higher chance on potential injuries. So we're not going to interpret the data for you, but we want to give you more objective tools to do your analysis. So this is a very simple example. It gives you in one overview, you can see how somebody performed at the single leg hop, but also gives you a little bit of insight on the technique, because was there enough knee flexion during the hop? Was there enough hip flexion in a movement? Because you can jump also with a very nice leg symmetry index of, for example, 2 meters left and right, but one leg can have a perfect technique and the other leg could be perfect or completely straight without no bounce, no damping, no nothing. And then symmetry index is good, but technique is very worse. And this way you can objectify it. And we have ways to deep dive into the data for the single leg hop distance, for example, because you can also, in all different planes, you can overlay the graphs. So it gives you a little bit more in-depth analysis if you want to. So you can look for the data, but it's not necessary. So this is an example how we want to get from the big bucket of data to meaningful parameters for practical application in sports performance and sports science. So this is something we can touch upon or explain even more if you are interested. Last nice case is a case in basketball, which basically shows a practical example of how people can interpret the data to analyze movements. This one was made with Kobe Bryant, and they used our Awinda system to analyze his movements. So basically what they're going to do is they are replicating three iconic shots in basketball: the Michael Jordan move, the layup move, and another one. So you'll see what he's doing, and then they are going to interpret actually what he's going to do. So provide, again, meaningful parameters to the recorded data. So I think this gives you a very nice overview of how you can use all the parameters you can acquire from Xsens and the kinematic data and use it into sport-specific analysis. So I hope this is an inspiring example for anybody of you. Maybe another one closer to home. Joe, you can talk about this one.
Yeah, thanks, Jordi. So, yeah, one of the guys from the newly renamed UK Sports Institute, or the EIS as it was known when these guys used it. So Liam Sanders, one of the guys from the EIS, used the motion capture system, and as you can see, obviously from the comments within the slide here, mentioned the ease of use of the Xsens system, and being able to use it out on the field. So, you know, one of the big advantages of the Xsens system is the fact that it is like a portable lab, is probably one of the ways I would definitely describe it. It enables you to be able to do analysis, you know, out in the field, and also with that, as Liam has mentioned here, you do get reliability and accuracy with this system. You know, it kind of enables you to be able to do you know, sport specific kind of movements, and being able to analyze these accurately. And this is what the Xsens system enables you to do. But again, obviously a very high profile sort of recommendation there for the Xsens system. And then I think, Jordi, you've got one last little use case to look at.
Yes, true, Joe. I have a last example on how you can interpret the data. And this is an example to show you that if you know a little bit where to look, that's also very easy to interpret the graphs in our own system and in our own software. So this is an example with a female soccer player. To give you some context, this player already had like a recurring hamstring injury 3 seasons in a row. Every time they focused again on improving hamstring strength, improving sprint strength, improving stopping power. However, every season it happened again. So what we did, we put her in a suit and first did some regular tests like we would normally do in the gym, in the performance, in the lab, and to take a look at a few parameters, but there everything looked fine. So what we did is then took it to the next step and go into a natural environment. So we did a training of half an hour, 45 minutes, and then after 45 minutes we let her shoot a few balls on goal, because that was the last time she had her hamstring injury as well. So what we then saw was this. So I'll play the video. Oh, sorry. Again, a little bit too fast. So what you can see, when she places her left leg, there occurs something. So I'll replay it. And if you take a look at the hip angle, the knee angle, and the ankle angle, you see there's a pattern in there. First, the hip will have something like a little hip drop. You can see it in the data because there's a decline in the angle. Whereas if it was stable, you would have seen a nice straight line. Then, when you look at the knee, it follows basically the pattern of the hip. So after the knee or the hip drops, the knee points out a little bit. And then lastly, we see in the ankle that the ankle makes like an inversion movement. So what we discovered by using the system in the natural environment in a fatigue state is that when she was more fatigued, that she wasn't able to do a perfect landing strategy anymore, and that way it would cause a lot of more strain on her hamstring injury. So what we did, we took a look at this, we advised the S&C coach and the physiotherapy to improve landing strategy, focus more on that stability during the strategy, like look at the complete chain of the movement, and this way we could objectify that after we did these therapies. I unfortunately have not that recordings, but until now, knock on wood, I don't have any piece of wood here, but she's still hamstring injury free. So this is a very nice practical example which you can show people how to use the system, but also show the added value of individualized performance optimization. So this was the last part of the webinar so far. I think we'll now move over to the Q&A session. The first question already came in, I saw, from Emily. Emily had a question about the foot slide. Very good question, because indeed that is a very difficult thing normally with IMU systems. However, with Xsens, foot slide is completely solved. So you can slide your foot, you can make a nice moonwalk if you want to, and there will be no issues in recording that. So it's all fixed within our sensor fusion engine, as we told it. And I hope, Emily, that answers your question. Otherwise, feel free to raise your hand or ask the question again. Are there maybe more questions? I'll take a look at my watch because I have Teams on here.
So I've got it straight up here as well if we need to, Jordi. But
okay, perfect.
We'll see if anyone's got any more questions. Someone would rather ask via their microphone. Just raise your hand. I can unmute you guys. Well, just had one more come in, Jordi. So Matthew has just asked what filter occurs when importing the data into Excel.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. That's a really good question, Matthew. Basically, there's no filtering happening. What we do is you record the data. And when you have recorded the data, you're able to HD reprocess the data. So what it does, it looks at every time frame. But because it is a recording, we already know what happened in the past, but we also know what's happening in the future. So that way we can solve stuff like skin artifacts, maybe some interferences. And after the HD reprocessing, it's basically a matter of hitting the export button, and then you can actually also select what kind of data you want to export in Excel. So you can select joint angles, orientations, velocities, accelerations of individual segments. So you can create your own Excel spreadsheet and work from there. I hope that answers your question.
Perfect. Sorry, Jordi, I did miss another question from Emily there, so I do apologise. She just said, how is the integration with Unreal Engine, I assume?
Yeah, good question as well. What we have an Unreal plugin. That means that you can either import our data into Unreal, or we also have a stream into Unreal. So with the Xsens MVN Analyse software, we have a network stream option. So you can stream data over the UDP protocol. And then with the Unreal plugin, Unreal accepts that stream. And from there, you can develop everything in Unreal and make a nice environment there. And use our kinematic data or our motion capture data in the Unreal plugin, or Unreal software, sorry. Does that answer the question?
Perfect.
I see there was another question I got in earlier. Also, for example, range. What range do we have with the system? So MVN Link has a range of 100 to 150 meters depending on where you use the system, because it comes on a Wi-Fi router. However, because we use a Wi-Fi router for the link, you can extend it using multiple routers. So basically it's endless. Or you can use the on-body recording feature, in which you can record for the duration of the battery anywhere without being a computer. For the MVN Awinda, it's a little bit different. We use a radio frequency protocol and an Awinda station, which basically is a receiving station which you plug into your laptop with a USB cable. And then depending where you are, you have a range between 25 up to 50 meters. But the nice thing with that is if you want to be within that circle, so basically you have a volume of 100 meters, but you can also follow the athlete if you want to. So in that way, you can basically also go anywhere you want to, as long as you're within that 25 to 50 meters range.
Perfect. Guys, if, like I say, if somebody would rather not type, I can unmute you if you'd like to ask a question via your microphone. I can do that, but like I say, if you just raise your hand. Otherwise, I think we might be all good.
Yeah, I think so, Joe. If all is good, and if there are no more questions, then...
oh, just have one.
There's another question. Nice.
Yeah. Can you see it?
So let me check. I'll get closer to the computer to see it. Yeah, I have it. I can see it. The data, 4 sections, back pelvis L5, T12, T8. Then you import into Vic and it becomes a 2 segment back? That's a really good question. For these kind of in-depth questions, I would really like to advise you guys to reach out to us, because we'd be happy to provide these kind of integrations between Xsens, Vicon, or maybe Xsens Colossus, or any other motion capture system you might use. And we have our product specialists, as they're called. They have really in-depth knowledge on these type of integrations and why, for example, it will change to a 2-segment back. So if you reach out to us through either Perform Better or our own support email, which is support@movella.com, we would be happy to deep dive into this question on a later stage, because I think at the moment it will be too in-depth to go over this complete answer. I hope you're okay with that, Matthew.
Perfect.
All right, then.
Guys, any more questions?
I believe that's it, Joe.
Yeah, perfect. Well, guys, first of all, thank you all for attending today's webinar. So really appreciate, obviously, your attendance. Hopefully you guys all found it useful, and also I will be well, not myself, but we will be providing a copy of the webinar round to you guys if obviously you would like to revisit this at a later date. But otherwise, thank you, Jordi, as well. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
Excellent. Cheers, guys. Well, thank you, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye, guys.